Jessica Henry Gray, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am in Sullivan's Beach, South Carolina, and we have gorgeous weather. It is windy, so I'm gonna do a voiceover after I'm done this video. But I'm gonna paint the ocean, and I hope you enjoy this, and be sure to check out the links below. I'll see you on the other side of this intro. Hey everyone, Jessica Henry Gray here, and thanks for watching one of my videos. On my channel, I concentrate on the joy of outdoor plein air painting. I talk about color, composition, efficiency, and so much more. I bring you 30 years of painting and teaching experience. So I hope you enjoy these videos, and let's go paint something beautiful. I'm very excited to announce that I am now being represented at Floyd Fine Art in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. If you're in the area of the Low Country, stop by. It's just north of Charleston by about an hour. Website link and all the information will be down below. All right, so beginning this painting, this is a 9x12 canvas that I'm working on. And I started out with just a sort of a gray base. That's ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, but more on the blue side. Wipe it on and wipe it off. I put it on a little bit darker than I need because I know when I wipe it off it'll be lighter. It just basically stains the surface. Now I know I don't need very much of the sky, so I'm going to just put a bit of that in there, and then I loosely block in where the shoreline is going to go and different features on the beach that I wanted to add. There were some large seaweed clusters on there that I wanted to make sure I grabbed. So I'm starting now with white and ultramarine blue for the sky after I get it blocked in. And I'm going to take my palette knife for a little bit here at the beginning. Little burnt sienna, yellow ochre into the sky mixture just to gray it down a bit. And the yellow ochre adds sort of a warmth to that gray mixture. So I'm mixing it just loosely with my palette knife. And then I'll scoop some of it up on the edge and come up and start laying down the just the sky, and then I'll build into this, and I do come back over later with my brush, but at this point I'm blocking in where I want just the overall mass of the sky. I don't want to make the sky very interesting that it's very distracting at this point, so it has to perform a function, and I have to be careful not to make it too bright and distracting. So I'm keeping it neutral. And as you can see, maybe a little bit from the background here, that it was very drab gray day, but the sun was out. It was sort of like an intense filtered light. So just laying down the colors, and I've got some little more white. I don't want to make it like flat wall paint back there. So I'm looking at movement of light across the surface of my canvas. A few clouds I'm adding with the palette knife, just barely glazing it on the surface of the sky. And now I'm starting to block in some of the darker passages of the water where it meets the sky. I've got some ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. That's sort of my base for water, anywhere water. And then from there I will add, just depending on where I am and what I'm painting. If it's an ocean, I tend to add a little bit more of the phthalo green to sort of turquoise and teal up the water a bit. Rivers and lakes, I wouldn't use so much of the phthalo green, but instead maybe a little bit more of the cad yellow, burnt sienna, yellow ochre mixture into that, because the sand in a lake or river is a different color than what you'd see in the ocean. So what I do with the palette knife is I'll just lay down a little color and I'll check it and go back to my palette and see if I need to mix it up or whatever. But what you don't see in the video is that I'll often step back. I'll put a brush stroke, or in this case a palette knife dab down, and then I'll back up and sort of step it and see, is that the right value? Is that the right color? So I just lay it down first with the palette knife, and then I'll come back through and soften an edge as needed with either with the knife or with the brush. So that's a nice warm gray mixture, slightly different than the sky. Now, one of the main problems that I had to deal with this plein air is that the sun then did come out. This whole thing took a couple hours to paint, and halfway through here, the water started looking more of a velvety sapphire blue in the distance. And as I was painting, I looked at that and I thought, well, what if I changed just a little bit And so these are the things that you are confronted with in the course of a plein air painting. That's my dog, Toby.
You getting it, puppy? He's a good boy.
Yeah, Toby digs belly deep trenches in the sand to stay cool. All right, so anyway, back to the painting. So what you have to do when you're plein air is decide, as your lighting has changed, if you do alter your painting a little bit, will it change? If you like the way that the light has changed your scene, do you like it better now? If so, how much will it affect your whole painting if you change a little bit here and there? You really, really do have to consider that when you are choosing to change the lighting in your painting. In the context here, because the ocean water got a little darker in the distance, it wasn't so overcast light gray, I decided that little bit of blue that I do add later on to the background only served to enhance it. I didn't think it changed too much to affect the overall composition and effect of lighting. So again, I'm just taking bits and pieces of the colors and laying it with the back of my knife, gently glazing the surface of the painting. And I don't use the palette knife the whole time, but at this point, I'm taking a dry brush and just gently dragging it along the edge of the coast, the shoreline back there. I'm sorry, the skyline. Just because I don't want a sharp edge there, because I do use the edges of my objects in a painting to sort of explain distance. So everything up close has a much sharper edge, and everything further back obviously has a softer edge and will appear to go in the distance. So now I'm using my brush again, and I'm just taking just a soft grayish mixture, a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow ochre, and some of the colors that I already had mixed up. And I wanted to map out the sky's reflection on the packed sand down below, because I'm kind of starting to block in the contrasts and the color blocking of the rest of the painting. A little yellow ochre into that mixture to create that sand color a little bit. I mean, every sand and every beach is a different color, so you can't come up with a recipe, but in this case, I do feel that more yellow ochre is part of this sand structure. This is South Carolina beach. But it's going to be entirely different. It's more purple sand down in the Delta, down in Florida. Obviously, Oregon, it's a much darker sand. You just have to observe whatever the color is and play with different mixtures. When I'm painting sand, I try to keep my brush strokes very horizontal, because it does create the illusion of that the sand goes this way. You have to watch out for that. I notice sometimes when you're painting sand, you have a tendency to draw your lines like it's coming at you, and so your brush strokes reflect that curvature, and it doesn't help with the illusion of horizontal land going out to the sea. So just watch that your strokes are always identifying that direction. Now the dry sand is obviously a lot lighter, so more white and yellow ochre into that. And I'm not afraid to scrunch my brushes this way and that way to get sort of a rough quality to the sand, or there's sticks and twigs and things. And I love dragging my brush a little bit this way and that way to get that. And I've added a tiny bit of the phthalo green to that yellow ochre and some white and blue, because I'm starting now to block in the water. And getting bits and pieces, a little cad yellow medium into that. When I would look at the water, I'll even make a few puddles of color to just dip into every now and then. But I'm looking at the waves and the color of the water as it comes up from the surface. And it had more of a greenish color like this. Phthalo green, some yellow ochre, some cad yellow, as the light was shining through the little curl in the waves. But I press lightly, and then I might press a little more with more pressure to get the illusion of a lift in the wave, that it's lifting up more. Like with anything, if you're painting trees or whatever, what's more vertical in your painting is going to be darker because it's not receiving so much of the light. And so that lift in the wave is going to be darker than the surrounding area around it. So I'm just cognizant of that. And in the trench down below the waves, it's picking up the sky more, and so it's going to be a different value than the rest. And then that's not counting where the highlights are, the shimmer wet in the sand. So I'm just trying to think about the anatomy of the waves and how they lift from each other. I'm adding just a bit of a highlight behind the crest of each wave to give it just a bit of a contrast there to illustrate the lift. Now I'm starting to take just some white and adding some sparkles to where that glossy, darker wave lifts up. Because they're not really big waves, they're still getting some light reflecting on that wet water. Some sort of that the foam lines going up the water, up the waves, help to identify the structure of that form going upwards. And now I'm starting to add the little bits of foam along the wave as it comes over the top and crashes. These are very small waves, but they do have some form and some of that splashing, so that's what I'm working on here, just to help identify what's happening with those waves. Little subtle brush strokes that help curve it around. And now I'm going to help sort of identify the water in the background, and I want to be very careful not to over detail it, but I do have to connect the amount of information in that front section with the back of the painting. I don't want it to be heavily just front right, so I'm dragging some of those highlights and information way in the back. Now here's a situation where I've added the darker blue back there, and compositionally I feel that it helps to draw the eye further into the painting. So when I mentioned earlier in this video about the challenges of your lighting changing, that worked to my advantage by adding that darker stretch of the deeper blue in the background, because all of those waves and things up front really drew the eye there and nothing to draw the eye further back, just a massive gray. So now I'm adding the dried seaweed and whatever the grasses are on the beach, and I'm just making a nice dark mixture of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and I'm starting to loosely sort of block in. They had these horseshoe shapes to these clusters of seaweeds as the water had beat it in the high tides, and so it kind of had that look still. And I think I was really drawn to those interesting shapes along the beach, so I wanted to incorporate those into this painting, especially as it pertained to the water and the ocean and the waves. It felt very coastal. So further back, they were more yellowy green. And then up front, they're darker, more contrasting, and there's some shadow on the sand. So I'm very loosely scumbling my brush roughly over the surface of the paint and the canvas and letting it sort of have a disheveled, imperfect feeling to it. So I'm coming back through with, and this is a size 3 long filbert by Treacle brush. I love Treacle brushes. I love the way they are springy and they hold their shape, especially the long bristles. So anyway, and I'm able to scumble in some really nice texture with those. All right, we're approaching the end. I'm starting to add little boats and little people and tiny elements of life to this beach. There were some boats out there, and I wanted to do some people. When doing people on a beach, it's basically a little carrot with the reflection in the water. The wet sand, I do like a shimmer underneath where they're standing, and it really does help to give the illusion of there's people, there's kids playing, there's a dog, or whatever, and some birds. There's got to be bird life on the beach. Well, that wraps this up. I hope you enjoyed this video and got something from it. I know I had a blast painting it, and it's so relaxing. So I hope that you found things that help you in this video, and check out the links below, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye-bye.